He smirked across the courtroom, certain he'd win, certain no one would believe her. But when Amanda pulled out the documents she had guarded like her last breath, the judge's gavel froze midair, and Ethan's face drained of color in an instant. The entire room fell silent, a silence so sharp it felt like it could slice through steel. But what happened next will shock even those who thought they'd seen everything. But first, let's go back to the beginning. The second Amanda Carter saw the second pink line bloom on the pregnancy test, it felt like her whole body exhaled a lifetime's worth of hope. The tiny bathroom smelled faintly of lavender soap and stale steam, but in that moment, it could have been a cathedral. She pressed the plastic stick against her chest, imagining the way Ethan would lift her up in his arms, laughing, swearing they'd figure it out together. She had pictured it all. The late-night crib assembly, the clumsy lullabies, the quiet promises whispered over a tiny, sleeping head. She never once pictured him leaving. When she told him, the world didn't end with a bang. It ended with a look. A quick, flickering glance that was all apology and no regret. Ethan's mouth twisted into something like fear or maybe disgust. His hand fumbled for his keys, his wallet, anything that wasn't her. "I can't do this," he said, voice hollow like the space already opening between them. "I'm not ready for all this. You're on your own." He didn't touch her. He didn't ask if she was okay. He just left, the door slamming shut with a shudder that felt like it cracked something in Amanda's chest. For a long time after he was gone, Amanda stood frozen, staring at the spot where he had been. The ticking of the kitchen clock grew louder until it filled the whole apartment. The heater rattled once in the wall. Outside, somewhere in the distance, a dog barked and the world kept turning. But inside Amanda Carter's apartment, time folded in on itself. She sat for hours, knees tucked to her chest, rocking slightly in a chair too big for the room, too empty without him. The pregnancy test lay abandoned on the kitchen table, still bright, still undeniable. She replayed their memories like a woman picking through the ruins of a house after a fire, searching for something worth salvaging, finding only ashes. But Amanda wasn't naive. Beneath the devastation, a steel wire of anger began to wind itself around her heart. Ethan hadn't left because he was scared. He left because caring required sacrifice, and sacrifice had never been written into his plans. He believed she would crumble. He believed she would cry, give up, maybe even disappear. But Amanda Carter had survived harder things than a boy running scared. She straightened slowly that night, her hand resting protectively over the small, still secret swell of her belly. A silent vow burned into her bones. "You don't get to choose when you walk away, Ethan, but I'll choose when you face the truth." And that day would come sooner than he ever dared imagine. The weeks after Ethan walked out hardened Amanda Carter in ways she hadn't thought possible. Mornings began before the sun and stretched long into nights where sleep was a stranger she barely remembered. At the diner, she pulled extra shifts until her feet throbbed inside cheap sneakers. Her back screamed from carrying plates and trays heavier than she could afford to drop. The smell of burnt coffee and fryer grease clung to her skin, a second invisible armor she wore because she didn't have the luxury of quitting. Customers whispered when they thought she couldn't hear. Young girls with round faces and sharper tongues. Older women who clutched their pearls and shook their heads like her life was already a cautionary tale. Amanda kept her head down. She served their pancakes and poured their coffee, all while her stomach grew rounder beneath the apron she tied tighter every day. There were nights when she broke, nights when she sat at the kitchen table, bills spread out like battlefield casualties, her hands pressed hard against her eyes to keep the tears from falling. But never in public. Never where anyone could mistake her strength for weakness. Meanwhile, Ethan Miller lived untouched by consequence. The pictures spilled across social media like salt into a wound. Ethan at beach parties, flashing his perfect smile. Ethan, cozy in the arms of some new, polished girl whose biggest problem was picking which filter to use. His life was a highlight reel of rooftop bars, Sunday brunches, and expensive sneakers, carefully curated to hide the truth Amanda knew too well. He hadn't just moved on. He had erased her. And he thought he had erased their child, too. Amanda had stayed silent long enough. She filed for child support, not because she needed revenge, but because the tiny heartbeat inside her deserved every chance she could claw out of this world. The first court date was a circus. Ethan sauntered into the hearing room like a man who had already won, a smug grin carved into his handsome face. He leaned back in his chair, arms folded like a king on a plastic throne, and spun a story slicker than oil. How Amanda had made it all up, how she was desperate for a payday, how the poor kid wasn't even his. Amanda listened without flinching, her hands folded neatly in her lap, her shoulders still and square. She could feel the courtroom watching her, the sideways glances, the murmurs rising like smoke. She knew what they saw. A young woman, tired and worn down, already judged before she spoke a word. She dropped her gaze, letting her hair curtain her face. But it wasn't shame that tightened her throat. It was satisfaction. Because tucked safely inside her bag, between neatly filed documents and a worn photograph of Ethan she'd almost thrown away 100 times, was something he hadn't accounted for. The truth. And when she showed it, the golden boy would fall so fast he wouldn't even see the ground coming. The bailiff called the court to order with a stern rap of his gavel. Ethan lounged in his chair, exuding the same lazy arrogance he wore like a designer suit. He thought this was already over. He thought he had won. Amanda rose slowly when her name was called, every movement deliberate, as if shedding the final layers of the girl she used to be, the one who waited for apologies, the one who stayed quiet when wronged. Not today. With steady hands, she handed a thick folder to her attorney, a young woman named Kate Monroe, whose fierce brown eyes had gleamed when she first saw what Amanda had brought. Kate moved to the judge's bench with the sharp efficiency of a woman who smelled blood in the water. "Your Honor," Kate said clearly, "we submit into evidence Exhibit A, certified DNA test results, administered voluntarily by Mr. Miller 3 months prior, during a hospital visit he conveniently forgot to mention." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Amanda didn't blink. She watched, heart pounding steadily as the judge adjusted his glasses and thumbed through the documents. His eyebrows lifted, just slightly, in quiet surprise. Then he looked at Ethan. "Mr. Miller," the judge said, voice dry as bone, "these results show a 99.98% probability of paternity. Your signature is on the consent form. Care to explain your earlier statement?" Ethan's smirk faltered. The courtroom, the same room that had moments ago swallowed his lies whole, leaned in, hungry for the fall. Ethan's mouth opened once, then again. No words came. For the first time in the years Amanda had known him, Ethan Miller, the golden boy, the smooth talker, the one who always had a way out, was speechless. His hands fumbled for the table, knocking over a glass of water. The bailiff's boots thudded against the floor as he stepped forward, ready if needed. And the whispers started, hissing, sharp, unstoppable. Amanda stood still as a statue, her chin lifted, her eyes unblinking. She didn't gloat. She didn't cry. She simply watched as the weight of truth, undeniable, documented, final, crushed Ethan where he sat. For years, he had written the story. Today, Amanda Carter rewrote the ending. And when she finally allowed herself to breathe, it wasn't the shaky breath of survival. It was the solid, anchoring breath of victory. The courtroom emptied like a receding tide, leaving behind only scattered papers and the faint buzz of dying whispers. Amanda sat alone for a moment longer, letting it all settle. Not just the verdict. Not just the shame Ethan now wore like an ill-fitting jacket. But everything. The months of fear. The loneliness. The long nights spent tracing dreams across cracked ceilings, wondering if she had the strength to make it one more day. She had made it. And she had done it on her own terms. Outside, the world felt sharper, clearer, as she stepped down the courthouse steps. The sun cutting through the brisk autumn air, the city humming with life as if celebrating her quiet triumph. In her purse, neatly folded, were copies of the court's ruling, full acknowledgement of paternity, mandated support payments, and a restraining order to keep Ethan's entitled smirk a safe distance away from the life he had forfeited the day he walked out. But Amanda didn't need the papers to feel free. Her freedom was stitched into every step she took toward her car, parked a few blocks away because she couldn't afford the courthouse lot. It was in the soft flutter of the ultrasound photo tucked carefully into her wallet. It was in the way her hand now instinctively rested over her swelling belly, a silent promise written in bone and blood. You are wanted. You are loved. You are mine. Amanda knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be sleepless nights, unexpected bills, hard questions she couldn't always answer. But for the first time in a long time, she wasn't afraid. Because strength wasn't something you waited for someone else to give you. It was something you built with your own battered hands, brick by brick, scar by scar. And as she reached her car, a battered old thing that rattled like a tambourine but still started on the first try, Amanda smiled. Not the brittle smile of survival, the real one, the kind that tasted like hope. She didn't drive straight home. She stopped by a small coffee shop tucked between a bookstore and a thrift store, treating herself to a decaf latte and a moment of peace. She watched the world pass by through the fogged glass, her hands cradling the warm cup like a blessing. Amanda Carter wasn't waiting anymore. She wasn't hoping for rescue. She wasn't wishing for someone to choose her. She had already chosen herself. And for the life growing inside her. And for the woman she had fought to become, that choice was the beginning of everything that mattered.